It was intended to be a private and modest wedding, a new beginning, a celebration of fresh love. However, the covert ceremony between Papoose and Clarissa was far from tranquil. Instead, it became a public spectacle that will never be forgotten by anyone who attended the event or watched the widely shared videos. In the midst of the promises, flowers, and whispered secrets, Remy Ma entered, upending the entire situation. She went mad not simply because she attended the wedding. Papoose was known as Remy Ma's dependable and ride-or-die spouse. In their partnership, they had faced many hardships, such as disagreements, fame, and incarceration, according to claims that appeared on blogs and fan sites. Fans were therefore startled to discover that he was seeing Clarissa Shields, a rising boxing sensation. Some believed it to be a joke. Others speculated that it might be related to business. However, speculations that Papoose was getting married and moving on were confirmed when paparazzi caught him in matching attire, having secret dinners, and eventually a leaked invitation to a private union. Only VIPs and close friends were allowed to attend, and the invite list was very small. Despite the ban on phones, someone regularly manages to record. It was a beautiful setting, almost too beautiful for a tale that would soon be reduced to a random urban legend. Papoose, dressed in white on white, stood at the altar. Clarissa came down the marble stairs, looking stunning in a beautiful gown with a clear veil. Nobody knew what would happen when the music began to swell, and the officiant inquired if anyone had any objections. The two doors swung open. People let out a gasp. Despite their cover, cameras began to film. She was there. Remy, dressed all black for battle and grief. She didn't yell, okay? She refrained from crying. She walked with the rage of a tornado and the grace of a queen. The space grew cold. Clarissa appeared shocked. Papoose's mouth fell open. The officiant took an unsteady step back. The sound of a pin dropping was heard. Then Remy said something. "Do you people really think this is love? You think you can give up over 10 years for a couple of pillow talks and workouts?" No one had the courage to move. Some attendees, especially the few influencers there, were unable to turn away, but others tried. The wedding was no longer the same. "There was an altercation," she said in a quiet voice that, nonetheless, cut through the tension. "He no longer tolerates you." Remy strode forward, going directly toward Clarissa rather than Papoose. The silence grew unbearable. "I gave him everything, dedication, years, a legacy. Okay. And now you stand here like you earned it." Clarissa tried to remain calm in spite of her obvious fear. "Spree, I didn't take anything. This would not be a secret moment." The camera flashes highlighted the argument like fireworks. Papoose stood motionless, caught between trying to defuse the situation and acknowledging that there was no turning back. When security arrived, it was already too late. Remy grabbed Clarissa's veil before grabbing the wig. Screams were heard. Everyone stood. Remy grabbed the microphone from the officiant and looked around the crowd. "Since you all like secrets, let's share some. What about those Miami hotel receipts? The ones from when we were married, you know?" Clarissa threw herself at her, and a full-fledged brawl broke out, sending hair, clothes, and shoes flying everywhere. Security eventually broke up the fight, but the damage was already done. The wedding was over, and their attempt to write a love story had been turned into a public soap opera. The films were trending globally by the time they went viral on social media, with thousands of reposts under the hashtags #RemyMa, #PAPOOSE drama, and #wedding clash. They argued over who was right, with some arguing that Remy lost her rage and others defending her, saying that betrayal has consequences. The scene was copied by TikTokers in a matter of hours. When news outlets attempted to obtain statements, none of the parties responded. But behind the scenes, more was being revealed, with close sources leaking more receipts. Clarissa reportedly texted Papoose while he was still posting a lot of anniversary tributes to Remy. It turns out that Remy knew about the wedding weeks in advance, which is why she was ready. Her expression wasn't a coincidence, it was a declaration. She wanted everyone to see her suffering, even if she had previously been portrayed as the villain. Fans began to wonder if it was a marketing stunt, or did one of hip-hop's most well-known couples actually break up? After the dust settled, the questions kept coming in. What caused Papoose to move on so quickly? How close was his relationship with Claressa? The timelines did not coincide, and the rumors persisted. Remy was not active on social media for a few days before posting a single story, which was a blank screen with the clear statement, "Betrayal never cuts as deeply as truth." She continued talking, and it's evident that if people thought she would leave amicably, they forgot who she was. During this time, Papoose tried to keep up his reputation, but every public move he made was met with condemnation, and even Claressa, who was praised for breaking down barriers in boxing and being a powerful Black woman, started receiving hate mail online. They wanted to know. Claressa's public relations team rushed behind the scenes. She canceled 2 appearances. One of her endorsement deals allegedly stopped promotions. She wasn't prepared for the storm of loss when she fought outside of the ring. Remy wasn't finished. She already knew what she was going to do next. Her comment sections were flooded with people. The wedding photos they attempted to post? A proportion. The romantic tale lacked plausibility. Industry sources claimed that she had more to say. An open interview, a podcast interview, or possibly a diss track. Whatever it was coming. And it was going to be a powerful blow because Remy Ma is not merely a respondent. She retaliates. And this was only the beginning. Papoose stood in stunned silence, his hands clasped tightly at his sides, unable to comprehend the chaos that was taking place in front of him. The peaceful music that had filled the courtyard had been replaced by whispers of surprise and gasps from people too afraid to stop it. Claressa staggered back, still stunned by Remy Ma's strike, palm flying to her scalp. The remnants of her once immaculately styled wig now dangling from Remy's hand like a prize. The audience gasped, and someone yelled, "Someone stop them!" However, no one has yet to move. Everyone was immobile due to the extreme stress. Remy's chest rose and fell in anger, and her breathing was heavy. But she didn't flinch. She lifted, the wig high, mocking Claressa, who had at last found her equilibrium. "You believed you could rob me of everything while appearing innocent. You really thought that I would be forgotten and that you would be in white at the end of this," said Remy, her voice breaking with sadness and rage. Finally, as she lunged at Remy, 2 security officers hurried over, seized her arms, and dragged her back. The irony was that it had entirely transformed, even though the cameras, because, of course, cameras were rolling the entire time. Out of sight of the couple who intended to exploit this wedding as a documentary's redemption tale. However, Papoose had remained silent and kept his gaze fixed on Remy, who was more than just his wife. He had publicly supported her when it appeared like everything was against her. But even he had to acknowledge that he barely recognized this degraded and betrayed version of her. Remy let go of the wig at her feet and approached Papoose at a leisurely pace, her heels clicking like warning bullets on the marble surfaces. "So what? Are you going to marry her right here after everything?" she asked him, her eyes hazy. Papoose took a hard gulp. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words became stuck in his throat. The crowd burst as Claressa, still under security restraint, screamed, "Pap, tell her the truth. Tell her how long you and I have been together." Remy Ma was waiting in the midst of all of this, not for the crowd or the cameras, but for him. When Papoose finally made a statement, Remy's jaw tightened. "Remy, I didn't expect things to turn out this way." His voice shook, heavy with regret. "But after everything, you changed." Many phones that were still out were recording every second of this heated discussion. Others were trying to leave in silence, fearing what might happen next. "We both did," both did. You dare not put it on me. I'm not, he shot back. But you've been so aloof, Remy. I tried to make things better. Now, in silence, Remy's face was crying, but not for Claressa or Papoose, but for herself, for the years she dedicated. Herself, too, for the sacrifices she made and for the loyalty she offered. And this was her reward. Now that the guards had left her, Claressa came forward again and said, "You knew he was going to ask me to marry him today. In the limelight, you also wrecked it." Remy turned to her and gently cleaned her face. "You all publicly humiliated me whenever you felt like it, and I didn't do any harm." The room was silent once more, and the tension had changed. Then police sirens sounded, and everything stopped. It seems that the moment things got physical. Someone called the police, and suddenly the night was filled with flashing red and blue lights, like a crime scene. Officers rushed past the guests, demanding order. And one of them approached Remy Ma, saying, "You're being held for assault, ma'am." There were gasps, and Remy's mouth dropped open. Papoose realized that there was no simple solution, that his choice would break someone, and that perhaps, just possibly, it was too late for them all. "I said I would have the final say. You must be kidding with me." "No, ma'am," the officer said. "Everything is on camera." Claressa grinned broadly. "You can explain everything at the station." Remy would not give her that satisfaction. The officers started to lead her away. She turned to face Papoose, who was motionless in thought. Claressa placed a hand on Papoose's shoulder and said, "Leave her alone." "I loved you," she said in a low voice that sounded as though she had lost all strength, "and I would have stood up for you. But you handed me over to the enemy." Papoose was stunned and unable to move, simply standing there with his eyes wide and his lips pressed into a thin line. Each of us made our own choices. But as Remy Ma was carried away, the audience gradually started to dwindle out, because her comments looked empty, with torn flowers, shattered champagne glasses, and a trail of chaos left in the aftermath of one of hip-hop's most dramatic love triangles. The once magical wedding scene had turned into a battlefield. Once back inside the mansion, Claressa attempted to continue the ritual. But the magic had vanished and the guests had had enough. How about Papoose? He was overcome with regret as he stood by himself beneath the vows arch, gazing into the night. Although it wasn't meant to end this way, there is a very thin line in this world between devotion and betrayal. And sometimes after you've crossed it, there's no going back. Some flickering candles were still blazing, their flames trembling in the wind as if they were mimicking the chaos that had just occurred. The sun had long since set, and the once bright brightness of the secret wedding venue had faded into a cold, unpleasant calm. The ruins of what was meant to be Papoose's new beginning were all that remained after Remy Ma was removed. A queen deposed in public and hauled out in handcuffs. The white petals on the floor now resembled ashes, signs of a love story that had faded to dust, and he stood still beneath the bridal arch. Even though the police had driven away, the guests had departed, and the producers had packed up their gear. Papoose stayed still, his thoughts reliving every moment. The wig, the slap, the shouting, the betrayal. Claressa came back into the room, her face still flushed from rage and shame. With unfocused eyes and a distant voice, he gently turned his head in her direction. "You can't simply stand here all day, Pap," she whispered. "If we desire it, we still have a future, do we?" Claressa paused, surprised. He stepped back from the altar and walked carefully past her, saying, "What are you saying? You planned the whole thing like it was a performance? It was supposed to be a show, right? Love isn't that? That's control." Claressa hissed, raising her defensive walls. "So I'm to blame now." She came in like a raging storm. "She made us both look bad." "No," he whispered softly as he turned to face her. "She humiliated you. I was already broken before she walked in." Claressa's face hardened, and Papoose responded, "I don't know, but I can't go forward with this." Remy's remarks were even. more devastating than any smack she could have given. Shh, not in this manner. Not with you. What the heck? Will you return to her? A female officer had handed her a cup of water earlier, but she hadn't touched it, and she kept thinking about the look on Papoose's face, the hurt, the silence, the betrayal. Then the wedding was over. The fantasy was shattered. And hours later, Remy Ma sat alone in a small holding cell, her arms folded tightly across her chest. The adrenaline had worn off, replaced by exhaustion and disbelief. Was it worth it? That was the question that tormented her. She didn't regret defending herself. But maybe she had let the fire inside her burn too hot, scorching everything in her path, including the man she loved. As she was let out, she noticed that Fat Joe was waiting for her in the lobby, opening his arms and saying, "You really had to go full Bronx on M, huh?" Remy couldn't help but laugh a little, even as tears filled her eyes. This made her heart skip a beat. She hurried into his arms, happy to see a familiar face, and said, "I messed everything up, Joey." He withdrew and took her shoulders, stating, "No, you defended yourself. You are that person. However, you must now choose who you want to be going forward." In the meantime, Papoose sat by himself in a hotel room he had booked for the honeymoon. The silence too great to bear, and he looked through his phone, each app showing footage of the disaster. He shut everything off and tossed the phone aside, realizing that somewhere along the line he had lost his compass, and that, in seeking comfort from Claressa, he had left the one person who had supported him through thick and thin. Remy had her flaws, of course, but hadn't they both? By the following morning, the world was split into factions, with some applauding Remy and praising her as a woman scorned who refused to be disrespected, while others called her bitter and washed up. Claressa tried to turn the tide in her favor, with a tearful Instagram Live presenting herself as the real victim, but it wasn't working. Papoose decided to speak up after realizing that the storm would not go away on its own. He broadcast a video to his followers that afternoon in which he sat in a dark room with only one light overhead and said, "I owe everyone an explanation, but more overtly, I owe Remy an apology. I thought I could move on," he said, pausing. "Not for what happened last night, but for everything that led up to it. For me, love was about ease and comfort. But fidelity is what love is all about." After a few days, the media circus dispersed, and Papoose showed up at Remy's house without any cameras or a script. The video went viral immediately, and Remy watched it in silence, tears silently tracing lines down her cheeks. She had no idea what would happen next, or even whether reconciliation was possible. But for the first time in a long time, she felt seen. It was just him and a lot of apologies. "What do you want, Pap?" "Toe talk," he said simply. "Two. Be real." Remy studied him for a long moment before stepping aside, and then all of a sudden they were talking not as celebrities, not as scandal headlines, but as two people who had been through hell and maybe still had a little heaven left to fight for. Because love in the spotlight is cruel, but sometimes the biggest victories come after the darkest falls. We've seen the secret weddings, the fights, and the viral tears, but the fallout is just getting started. If this wild roller coaster of love, betrayal, and public breakdowns left you speechless, don't worry, this story is far from over. What happens next with Remy Ma, Claressa, and Papoose could completely upend the plot. Your support helps us delve deeper, break the hottest stories first, and bring you the real tea without the sugarcoating. If you're feeling brave, leave a comment below. Who is really at fault in all of this? Is Papoose just caught in the crossfire? It's just the beginning, and it will get much messier. Pay close attention and stay loud. Keep being legendary. Legendary.